All right, and just like that, we are back again with the Mind the Growth podcast. As always, I am Chris Kinghorn.
And I'm Eric Hoffman.
And hey, everyone, I'm Alex Glenn.
And we have an amazing guest today, Alex Glenn. Alex, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Perfect. So let's dive right into this. Alex, can you give us a little bit of context on your background, who you are, for some of the listeners who might not be familiar with you?
Yeah, sure. So I have a background in finance, studied finance at ASU, and I actually did study at ASU, surprisingly.
The Harvard of the West?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we consider ourselves, right? But I did a number of different internships in the financial industry. I did a stint at JP Morgan on the private banking side, and then was lucky enough to grab an analyst associate role at a VC firm here in Arizona called Greyhawk Capital. There, I helped them manage all their deal flow for all of their investment. They were doing Series A, Series B investing in early stage technology companies in a wide variety of sectors. That was awesome. Loved that experience, learned a ton. And during that time, I met a couple guys who were getting a company off the ground in the logistics space. They were using IoT data and machine learning to more efficiently distribute freight. Thought it was a great idea. I didn't see many people in the industry who were really thinking the way that they were, and I thought they had the right idea at the right time. So I jumped on with them, started off kind of slow, but really picked up pretty quick. Ended up leaving the VC firm and doing that full time as the CFO, raised some money there, and grew the company for a couple of years. We sold that company in early 2020. And then since then, I've been working on Uplinq, where we are working to automate bookkeeping and financial intelligence for small businesses and do a lot of other cool things too.
Perfect. No, that's an amazing story. I mean, it's been quick, but you've done so many cool things at a very young age. So that's
what are you 45, 50 by now?
I kind of feel like it. I describe myself as an old 26.
Yeah. Okay. Impressive. Bravo.
I can relate. So, Alex, if we look at your time kind of in the VC world and transitioning into the operational side, how was that transition? What did you take away from working at VCs, and how did you apply that at a VC and apply that into kind of the operation side where you're running a startup?
Yeah, I mean, when you're at a VC firm, you get to, if you're in the right place and you're working with the right partners, get to really understand what makes and breaks tons of companies, right? You learn the 10, 20, 30, 40 potential reasons that companies fail, right? There's too much competition, the market's too small, the sales cycle's too long, the churn's too high, et cetera, et cetera. And that information and that context I've found is really helpful when you're trying to make business decisions from the operator's perspective. So I think that's the thing that it does prepare you to do. It prepares you to kind of think about the potential problems you might run into or the potential challenges, an idea, a concept, a strategy you could have, and think about ways to hedge those bets. It does not help with some of the other challenges that you run into when you're trying to operate and scale a business. However, you have to do a lot of other things from the operating side that I think are somewhat unique to being a fast growing startup, right? You have to have an incredible ability to bring in the right talent at the right time, because I think people can have the biggest impact on a company's ability to succeed. And so some of those other things are, a little bit more idiosyncratic to the role of being, a leader in a tech company. But I think having the context for decision making and the things that you should be concerned about from the VC side was very, very helpful as it came onto the operating side.
Awesome.
So with that in mind, one thing that I'm curious about, because speculating on the situation, since I've never worked for a VC or haven't really been a VC myself yet, but what I would expect is being in that environment, you're able to identify certain metrics in startups that are pretty clear that this startup's going to become successful if they're reaching certain benchmarks, metrics, etc. So can you give the listeners an idea of maybe what that looks like from a VC's perspective, what they're looking for, and now that you're, in your second startup, what you're doing to basically achieve that, and not gaming the system, but getting a step ahead, knowing some of that background? Can you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of metrics and potential indicators of high and positive performance. So I won't try to list them, but maybe I can give a good example or two. One that maybe everyone's heard of, but I think is very important and is indicative of whether the solution that you're pushing in front of the market is something the market actually is interested in, is the LTV to CAC ratio. That looks at two things. It looks at what the value customer is going to be able to deliver to you over a period of time is going to look like, and there's some estimation involved in coming to that number. But the other side of that is your customer acquisition cost, right? How much money it's taking you to get a customer over the line. And the number that I think is actually the most interesting there is what is the CAC number. How much money does it take for you to get a customer? Because that's really indicative of not only how performant your marketing and your sales expense is, but more holistically, it's actually giving you some kind of indication potentially of whether the market actually needs your solution in the first place, and whether you actually have product market fit, or you're selling something that maybe people really don't need or even want. And so with Uplinq, we've been really, really concerned about what does our CAC look like, and what does our LTV look like, and what kind of a ratio do we have? There's standard benchmarks in the industry that investors look for, and the number is 3 when you're thinking about what a good and an acceptable number is. And so you want to be able to generate at least 3x the value and the return that you're spending to bring a customer into the company. And so when we at Uplinq think about how we're building and scaling a growing organization, we're very concerned about how effective and efficient is our marketing spend. So we started, our marketing spend in early December. So we've only got less than 4 months of spend under our belt. And we really aggressively moved out of the gate. I've got a very, very experienced marketing team led by my COO, CMO, who scaled a multi-thousand marketing consulting firm on his own. And we've been able to get our cost per lead drastically lower than the competition, and some of which is very established competition, and get our sales close rate over 50% from every proposal that we're sending out. What that's allowed us to do, in combination with the rising average revenue per customer, is drive our LTV to CAC over the last 30 days to between 6 and 8x. Which is really, really exciting for us, because that tells me, A, my marketing and sales teams are effective, but more importantly, that the solution that I'm putting in front of customers is really meeting their needs, and it's accelerating, right? So that started out as a 3x in January, and it went to 4 to 4.5 in February, and now it's really starting to take off in March. And so having the context to think about what metrics will indicate success before we started our sales and marketing operation, I think has definitely benefited us and given us, the right targets and metrics to look for early on that can allow us to scale and grow pretty rapidly.
So a quick follow-up to that, with regards to the LTV, ultimately the lifetime value of your customer, yep, for those who don't know, how are you calculating that at such an early point? And are you using a lot of assumptions? Are there, certain standards that are applied to that from a VC's perspective? How do you do that when you're still such a young company and you don't maybe know the true burn ratio of, people that are churning out, or, the amount of money you're spending elsewhere? So a lot of info, but how do you look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a great question. So the first thing that you should be thinking about when you're trying to give some kind of estimation, because it always is until you've got years of historical data to benchmark, is to think about the industry, because industries and sectors have very specific data points around how people use a plumber versus how people use a lawyer versus how people think about, a physician, right? And so when you think about the lifetime value of a customer and how long somebody is going to stay with somebody in the accounting and bookkeeping world, it's actually very long. So over 50% of people stay with a bookkeeper and accountant for 8 years or more. So it's actually an incredibly sticky industry. So if you're able to get a client in this space and make them happy, they're going to stick with you for a very long time. So that's above average when it comes to lifetime value, in across the board. But what we thought about here, and I guess the other data point that I would say, is that we've only had one customer churn with us thus far. They were a brand new company that was getting off the ground. They ended up hiring an admin who had bookkeeping experience, and to cut costs, they were like, hey, we're just going to go with this person for a while. So we've only had one of our 59 customers churn over the last 4 months, but they actually started with us in August. They were one of our beta customers. So we've had a very low churn rate to date, about 1.8% of count and 1.3% of ARR. So churn has been low for us to date. So those are the two data points that I'm using as kind of grounding my assumptions. But what I assumed is that, we're going to have, 15 to 20% churn by year one, and then we're going to have 100% churn by year two. So I'm assuming my cohorts are revolving every 24 months. So I got to replace every customer in that time period. What I think is going to be far more likely is that we're going to have, 15 to 20% churn every year for 3 to 4 years. And then we're just going to have this residual group of customers that are going to be really happy with us and stay for years and years. But to make sure that my assumptions are reasonable and conservative and that we don't get over our skis, I'm going to be very, very conservative on how I'm thinking about our churn over the years ahead.
No, that's a great explanation. Alex, can you give us and the listeners just a little bit of context of what Uplinq is, what you guys are doing? That way they can kind of wrap their heads around it. I know you mentioned bookkeeping, but maybe dive into what you guys are doing a little bit more.
What does that mean?
So I will not go right into bookkeeping because people are just gonna leave because it's not the most exciting topic. So I'll take one step back first.
What makes this show different from any other show?
Exactly. So when I was at Greyhawk, I did see a real need in the industry for business owners to be better supported, tools that they use to make better financial decisions. When we were working with businesses, we often were asking them questions based on their historical and forward-looking financial data, and they had a really hard time answering those questions. And I don't think it's because they didn't think about things the right way. I think it was actually because the tools that they were using weren't solving their needs and serving the decision making that the business owners themselves needed to do. And I saw that firsthand when I jumped into Hollings and started trying to make those kinds of financial decisions. QuickBooks and other accounting providers were great when I had to get my taxes done, but really didn't help me make smart forward-looking financial decisions. And that led us to this conclusion that, hey, there's a need in the back office accounting space for SMBs to step up the solutions in that vertical for business owners. And we saw this was a need for not only growing technology companies but mom and pop businesses and medium-sized enterprises as well. We started looking at the solutions in the market and thought there was a real opportunity, and where we found there was some technology that could really power things, happen pretty quickly. And that there's been a number of different aggregators in the space that allow us to connect to over 10,000 different financial institutions, but also allow us to connect to over 30 different accounting and point of sale solutions and 100 different payroll and HR providers. And we think that connecting to all of these different providers together, giving us an ability to connect to more data that we can then consolidate and combine into far more contextualized journals that form a basis for how our bookkeepers and our machine learning then go about creating accurate historical and ongoing financial data for these business owners is really groundbreaking. What we saw when we started working with a few of the businesses that were struggling, to make forward-looking financial decisions is that part of the problem was that their historical bookkeeping was often done inaccurately or maybe not even done at all. And so we realized that we couldn't just layer something on top of their accounting stack and create great results. We actually needed to be able to dig into the data and generate that post bookkeeping accurate financial data to be used in the process. And so that solved a real need for our customers. We, like I said, launched our initial product in December. We were planning on doing that end of Q1 of this year, but we were able to launch that early. And we've seen a really exciting, uptake in customer activity. We've onboarded 55 customers in the last quarter. We've grown ARR by 300,000, and we're on a rate to hit 1 million by probably July, August. So we're really excited about what we're doing here as a company, and really excited about the problem that we're solving for the businesses that we're working with.
So for the technologically inept like myself, how do you connect to these different software programs? Is it through like a Zapier or more like through a Plaid? Because that's more of the financial version, or are you developing your own APIs?
Yeah.
How do you connect and subsequently take the data to aggregate it?
Yeah, so it's solutions like Plaid that we're using to access the financial data. It allows us to let users enter their own credentials and give us a key that allows us to access that data via API continuously, right? So the need to manually upload, financial data to a solution or to an individual or to mail them to your bookkeeper or accountants, which we've heard more often than we expected, goes away. So getting continuous data accessibility with these business owners is paramount to giving them a seamless experience with our platform. So we've spent a tremendous amount of engineering hours developing very good APIs that can continually access that financial data. But there's a lot more than that, right? Because we access all of this different disparate financial data, and we need to turn that into a really useful data set that we can run machine learning models on and deterministic logic to be able to turn into very, very easy to finalize financial data for a human to review and ship off to a customer, right? So that's what we've spent a tremendous amount of time continuing to develop is what is the best and most effective and most efficient way for us to use machine learning, which has been spearheaded by my CTO, who was a ML PhD dropout and worked at Google on the health tech side. We've got some really great advisors and other team members on the ML side who are both on the academic side and are also coming from the Google space. And we've also got just a really great engineering team that are good at making sure that that data is always accessible and always in the right place at the right time to be able to drive really valuable insights. And so as we've started to work with real customers, we're getting this very rich data set that we're already being able to see a lot of really interesting results, both at a company level when we're trying to understand, what an individual transaction is, where we have different contexts from their historical data, but also when we look at the companies that we're working with in aggregate and try to understand how the different businesses that we're working with are performing, both compared to each other and based on the financial decisions that each of them are making, and how we can use that understanding to help business owners make better decisions.
So, am I understanding that the goal or the mission for Uplinq is to put bookkeepers out of business, or will bookkeepers be using your product to make their jobs easier? Which is it?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna walk the fence and say it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
We see that a lot of what bookkeepers are doing is an incredibly manual task that they don't like doing themselves. The business owners that we're working with oftentimes have somebody who does the bookkeeping in their office, and they really don't want to be doing it. There's better things for them to be doing with their time, and it's something that they want to offload to our company. So what we're trying to do is make the people in the small business owners' offices much more efficient, much more valuable to their business. So what we're trying to do is reduce that workload from those businesses and bring it onto us. The thing that we're thinking about with our internal team is we're not trying to eliminate the human action to make sure that bookkeeping is clean and up to date and accurate, because we think that that's really not the right goal for us to be thinking about right now. We're looking to make the bookkeepers exception managers in this role, where they're looking at and digging into those hard to understand or more complicated or more nuanced situations that these business owners are running into, or where they're making decisions that a computer would have a lot of difficulty building the context to understand properly, and getting involved at that point where it's valuable to ensure that the accuracy is always there, but where we're really able to limit the amount of intervention that any one human has to have with any one business, so that we can increase and scale the amount of businesses that an individual bookkeeper can work with really effectively.
So, Alex, can you give us just a little bit of context on kind of when you guys started this journey, what your headcount's looking like, just a little bit of background on the company as a whole from a size perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been working on this for, and let me think, about 16 months now. And we started off kind of self-funding the company. Me and a lot of the other guys from the last company, started working on what we're building here. But we did grow the team pretty aggressively. We've got a lot of part-time workers and consultants that are doing, very specific roles for us that we've gotten to know over a number of years as our network's really expanded. But we do have a pretty sizable team now as we've been growing pretty aggressively. We've got over 25 full-time heads. We've got another dozen at least that are on the part-time capacity. So the team's definitely growing. We're in the middle of our fundraise right now, and we're looking to, by the end of the year, ratchet that up a whole nother tier. We think we're going to be positioned well for Series A about 9 to 12 months, and think we'll be able to be very successful there when we get there. So the team is definitely growing. But what we see is that the team that we already have today is going to be able to really scale with us. They're very experienced and very talented. So I'd say we really don't have any huge gaps, but it's more about just adding people who are going to be able to round out the experience and give us that right foundation to scale to the next level.
Awesome. Well, and then talking about scaling, I mean, obviously you guys it's early in the journey, but you've established and you have a good amount of customers and ARR already at this point.
Yeah.
Have you guys found a vertical that seems to be the best fit? Are you opportunistic about specific verticals?
Mm-hmm.
Will it scale across all verticals? How are you looking at that?
Yeah, well, what we've seen is that we actually are a lot less vertical specific than we thought. We came into this thinking that we're going to be working really heavily with dentists, with vets, and what we saw is that though those are great customers for us, it's more about the persona of the business owner and whether they see the value in understanding their financial data or feel real pain in the bookkeeping process that's going to drive them to us. What we're seeing is that the people who are clicking on our ad are either frustrated with how bookkeeping is done today or don't feel like they have a good handle on how their business is growing going forward. So if they don't feel one of those things, they're likely not going to be as excited about us as others. But if they are, they're really going to like what they hear, and they're going to come into that demo with really good expectations about what they're going to see. And what they see is usually going to be what they're expecting. And so that's what's driving an over 50%, proposal close rate as of today. So that's what I'd say about that. We're seeing that our customer size is actually growing over the last couple months. So we started out with a little bit smaller customers of maybe 1 million to 2, but where we're going now is we're going from maybe 2 to 10 million. As probably where we're getting the most amount of activity over the last 30 days. We're seeing that some of that is because we support multi-entity companies better than anybody else in the industry. We're able to really easily consolidate and deconstruct financial statements from a flagship company or a holding company to all of its sub entities. So that's something that a lot of the larger companies have been really excited about. But yeah, no, I mean we work with most sectors and most industries pretty effectively.
So do you think that long term it'll be more of an enterprise type of product, or is that something you're looking to develop more in depth, or is it mainly, at least for the foreseeable future, more on the small to medium business SMB side?
Yeah, that's a great question. What's interesting is that my conversations over the last couple months have indicated that our more long-term strategy may be viable. And so the real idea for Uplinq is that the financial data and financial insights, about these companies are not only valuable to the business owners themselves, but are valuable to the investors and to the lenders and to the service providers and to the other groups that want to partner or work with those businesses. And so we've built a architecture and a technology stack that allows us to not only support and provide insights to those business owners, but also to provide that same level of financial visibility to other parties. And so I've had a number of different conversations with larger enterprises that work with or lend to or invest in smaller to mid-sized businesses that are really interested in the application that this technology could have on their business. And so where I see this going long term is actually pivoting more to working with and partnering with larger enterprises who want to understand potentially the health of their own financial portfolio. Maybe they've lent to thousands of different small to mid-sized businesses and want to get an understanding of the health of every one of those businesses that they've lent to. And I could see them wanting to implement the technology that we're providing in an automated way or potentially as a bookkeeping solution as well to give them more financial visibility. So I do see us continuing to support small businesses, but I actually see our solution being multi-sided, where we're going to be able to work with larger enterprises who are paying us to get access to a continuous stream of financial data about thousands of businesses in a standardized way that their people can work with, while simultaneously providing real value to those small businesses that technology is touching.
That's huge. So besides that, is there anything else that you're targeting in terms of just aggregating the data that this could be applied to, or is that really the grand plan?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a few more ideas. There's definitely some other interesting applications to what we're doing, to what we're seeing about businesses, to what we're learning about the businesses when you think about the data the way that we're thinking about it. A lot of interesting insights come up to the surface when you have, hundreds of thousands or millions of financial transactions in a single data set, all normalized and standardized in the way that we're doing it. But, those I think will probably toss around internally for a while.
So, Alex, obviously, you've got to think about data. Previous startup was focused heavily around data, and Uplinq is obviously extremely focused on data. What attracts you to data? What has been this drive to want to do data plays?
Data porn
Yeah,
is what
data's hot.
us in the biz refer to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of cases, maybe too much value is placed on it, but I think in a lot of other times, not nearly enough of the focus is put on it. And I think that there's an incredible amount of opportunities in the market to connect data together in ways that it hasn't been able to be connected before. Eric, you mentioned, Zapier earlier. They're a good example of technology that's changing the way that people think about working with their data. I think there's going to be a massive influx over the next 5 to 10 years of more solutions that are making data more actionable. Data exists today, but data doesn't exist necessarily in a way that it's really useful. And I think there's going to be a real increase in the usefulness of data right now and over the coming years. And that's what I think, I've seen over my career continue to be true. And I think that's going to be true for a lot of other businesses as well. Is if you can find a way to access data that isn't easy to access, or to connect two different pieces of data that isn't easy to connect, you're going to be able to find a way to create a synergy or to create an efficiency that wasn't there before. And efficiency and synergy creates value. That's what we saw at the last company when we were able to take, truck location data that was really granular and really detailed, and historical load information that was really granular and really detailed, and push that together. We're seeing the same thing here when we're able to take a lot of individual businesses' financial data and consolidate that all together. We're seeing the same kind of value happen. And I think there's going to be a lot more plays there, where you're going to see data consolidate and combine and become more useful than just the individual pieces.
And what
So
importance
the
would you put
last
on? Sorry, Chris, one more. What importance would you put
uh,
on artificial intelligence or logic in aggregating the data, and or longer term, free advice for you to actually make decisions for these small businesses in either how they spend on, overhead or marketing or whatever else it may be,
Hmm.
utilizing industry specific, norms.
Hmm.
Uh, is that something you're looking into? And is that one of the things you said is secretively
Yeah,
is on the horizon that I just unearthed?
yeah. I mean, there's obvious implications to understanding, the success and failures of thousands of businesses, and being able to potentially unpack, at least the financial story of that outcome.
Mhm.
And so, if you can unpack the financial story of that outcome, you'll begin to see trends and insights and indicators that could be potentially relevant to, a group of businesses, or a subset of, a very precise subset of businesses, where you might be able to say, hey, there's really no reason we should know this, but we've seen that this might mean this for you, right? And it's just data that we've seen. And frankly, it's kind of hard for us to even explain potentially, but like, this insight could be important to your business. I think there's going to be
Yeah.
a lot of those kinds of situations, that are going to kind of pop up and spring up, and one of the challenges is going to be, how do you communicate that to a human really effectively, right? I mean, artificial intelligence has value when it's solving pure data problems, but artificial intelligence making actions and making decisions for a business is an entirely different affair, right? And so, what is the construct, and how do we think about building a solution that can help business owners make smarter decisions in a way that business owners want to interact with that solution? right? So I can think about AI solving my business's problems at Uplinq by making it more effective to provide my solution to business owners. But if I'm thinking about my artificial intelligence making business owners' business more effective, that's a whole different animal. So there are a lot of exciting opportunities for that if the data sets can get clean enough and rich enough for us to apply some of the models that already exist that can solve some of these problems, that have solved some of these problems in other industries and in other ways. So it's not fundamentally, a does the technology or does the science work, as much as it is, can we get the data and the right kind of data and manage it in such a way that we can generate the insights that we think we can, and can we create a system and a solution for users that meets their needs and solves their problems. And so I think artificial intelligence is obviously critical in the years ahead for businesses that want to really scale and create that next level of efficiency, that everlasting search problem, or that, whatever you need that artificial intelligence to be able to do for your business, to do what humans just couldn't do. But when it comes to interacting with other humans and having the artificial intelligence be a team member in a business, I think it's a unique problem. And we're obviously thinking about how we include those kinds of insights for business owners in the right way.
So I've got a very tough question for you because I know how passionate you are, especially about the ventures that you get into. So if you were not working on Uplinq, what would you be doing?
Oh man, if I was not working on Uplinq, I would be snowboarding
I
right
know
now.
you'd be on a
Yeah,
beach somewhere,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
I'd like to not be working for a minute. Actually, I think I'm learning as I get older that it's important to take breaks too. So that's something that's my nugget for the podcast. That it's actually quite important to take breaks. You'll burn yourself out, which I've already started to do. There are a number of exciting opportunities, as mainstream as this sounds in the tech world, in the crypto space. I do think there are some interesting things to be done with tokenization specifically. One of the things that I really like about Uplinq is that it's going to allow, or potentially allow, for more private capital to be invested directly into private businesses. I think that's a real disparity that needs to be corrected in the US. A lot of money can flow into the public markets, and it's really hard to move money from, an individual investor's standpoint into the private space. That's one of the things that I hope Uplink will someday be able to solve. But I think there's some other exciting things that are happening in that space to solve it. And I think that's another really interesting financial problem that I could see wanting to jump into. I think fintech in particular is a really exciting space. So I'd love to stay here for a while and continue to make some cool things. But there's obviously some consumer products that I think would be pretty interesting to play around with too. But I'll save that for another podcast.
Eric, I know you heard a little tokens and blockchains, and I saw you perk up a little bit. Do you want to roll us into cryptocurrency?
Yeah. What are you looking at these days, Alex? What are you invested in or excited by? Layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Tell us
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. So there's been a bit of a pause for me on the crypto front, and actually making moves. So I was very big on Bitcoin and Ethereum for a very long time. I think they're going to be, I think, the foundation of everything still going forward. I think a lot of the other coins have a lot of exciting applications, but I still think they're just the fundamental building blocks. And so that's where I think it's the best place to have the value stored. Me and some of my friends obviously, bought some of those other coins that were really fun. Dogecoin was a blast, but I've been primarily focused on some of the heavier stuff, some of the bigger stuff. Are you seeing anything, Eric, that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I think I most of my portfolio is broken up into Bitcoin and Ethereum. I would definitely agree with you that those are going to be mainstays for the long term. Some of the other exciting ones, I mean, I got pretty into the DeFi world last year, which had slowed down. It's kind of picking back up again, but the Aves, the chain links, the sushi swaps of the world all excited me at the time, which I still have some holdings in. But some of the other layer ones that are coming out more as Ethereum competitors, I'm fascinated by Avalanche more recently. That seems to be picking up a lot of steam, and I think the last I checked, are second to Ethereum in terms of the amount of revenue the actual chain is bringing in. A lot of the other ones, people don't quite realize they don't actually produce any money. It's just, a settlement layer that costs a lot of money to run. But Ethereum just is ridiculous in terms of how much revenue they bring in. Maybe like 300 million a week in just transaction fees, which is why everyone complains the gas prices are so high. As a business, that is just an incredible business. So I don't think Ethereum's going anywhere, and they're gearing up for their shift to Ethereum 2.0. So it'll be interesting to see how that blossoms. But I've been into Avalanche. A lot of people are liking Solana and Cardano similarly, but I think Avalanche has a good opportunity to grow.
How's your ape coin? Did you end up selling that, or how are we doing on that?
I did. Yeah. So I speculated and aped into ApeCoin when it was launched. It was, I don't know if you caught any of that, but the Bored Ape Yacht Club, the creators, Yuga Labs, they bought up the CryptoPunk IP, and they're making a lot of moves right now. They just raised $450 million from A16Z to develop their own metaverse, and they launched their own coin, ApeCoin. And right when it launched, it like skyrocketed to $40 a token, and then it hemorrhaged to I think $6 or $7. So I bought some at $8, figuring it's day one. Usually, historically, a lot of people, it skyrockets, dives, and then goes up again to try and recapture. And it went up to $14.50, I think, in the next 6 hours or so. So I bought at $8, sold at $14.50, and had a nice payday. So I don't. This is not investment advice. This is purely gambling, and it could have gone the opposite direction, but I happened to get lucky.
Alex, so some of the things we usually like talking about on the show. So we do interviews with a lot of startup founders, people in investment banking, et cetera. What another component to the show is Eric and I will usually do a weekly sit down, and we talk about anything from watches to cars to wine to investing, because Rolex and a bunch of other watch manufacturers have recently released their watches. We just did a show about watches earlier today. I know you're a car guy. Eric is also a huge car guy. So let's do this. Let's fast forward through your Series A and however long that turns out to be. What is the car that you would want in your garage when all the success is there? I mean, you're obviously a very successful person already. There's been a profitable exit. You're on your second venture, which is doing absolutely amazing. But, money's not a factor. What type of car is pulling up in the garage?
I mean, I like modern cars for all of the reasons, but I'd want something classic. If money's no object, I'd probably want a Cobra. I mean, the Cobra replicas are awesome. Like, they're so fun to drive. I had the chance to drive one once, and I was like, this is just the best time. Like, this is just so much fun. I mean, when you're in Arizona, you're in Scottsdale, and you're just driving around. It's definitely cool. But I'd love to get a Cobra, and that thing's gonna appreciate like crazy. So I wouldn't feel bad having one. I'd get two. I'd get the real Cobra, and I'd never drive it. And then I'd get a replica, and I'd drive it all the time.
Smart.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's going to need to be an Instagram post with hashtag. What
Cobra
would be a good
life.
hashtag? Yeah, Cobra life. Yeah, life is better in a Cobra.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There we go. Perfect. Well, before we wrap up, the last question that I like to ask everybody is, what does the word growth mean to you? I mean, and that can relate to work, that can relate to life. When you hear the word growth, what does that mean to you?
I think how I think about growth is getting, I feel like over the last couple of years, I've learned a lot about myself. I think that's one of the cool opportunities you get when you're doing things that push you and that challenge you, regardless of whether it's work or some other part of life. I think things that are hard show you who you are and what you want and what you value. And so I think for me, growth looks like, understanding myself more and learning more about myself and more about the world. So I think I've experienced a lot of growth over the last couple of years just because I've learned and I've watched how I react to things, how I feel about things, and kind of getting in touch with myself and what I care about and what I'm passionate about. And so I think it's been just a journey of learning for me, and I've really appreciated that in a way that I don't think I expected I would. So that's what I think about growth.
Great answer.
Cool.
Love it. Appreciate you coming on, Alex.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me. It was a great time.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. We appreciate it.
Yep.
Have a good one. Oh yeah, everyone, subscribe, like, comment. All
Annihilate the like button if you haven't already. We're at 19 subscribers. We need to get to 35. Come on, guys. We got to crank those numbers up. Alex, we interviewed Robbie. He said if we get to, I guess he said if we get to a 9-figure company, he'd sing opera for us. So make sure you guys are liking, commenting. We want to hear the opera.
I will not make that promise. Cool. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Cheers,
Thanks,
guys.
Alex. Bye.